What's up, everybody? Joel's back with another reasoning sesh where I challenge the status quo of the wisdom of the world and the church by diving deep into the ancient scriptures, uncovering meanings glossed over by translations, really cutting to the core of the metaphysical aspects of these ancient texts and applying it practically to situations in our present day. And today I'm going to be talking about how this higher dimensional fruit that manifests in our own lives slowly spreads out into the world around us and makes changes that we couldn't even dream possible.
Come now and let us reason together. Come now, we can talk it over.
But before I get into that, I gotta say, if you like these videos, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe for more, and stay tuned because as we accelerate crossing this threshold, we are only manifesting more and more of who we've come here to be, not bogged down by all this fear-mongering, but rising up as sovereigns in this new era of power in awareness. But with that being said, I'm just going to jump right into it. Today, I'm going to be talking about the fruit of the Spirit, which is discussed in Paul's epistle to the church at Galatia, where he says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, which is agape, joy, peace, which also refers to shalom, or wholeness and stillness in that harmony where nothing is missing and nothing is broken, long-suffering or endurance, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And then he goes on to say, if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. So this is what manifests in our lives as we're tapped in and in tune with Source. But guess what? When you plant a seed, you don't see fruit right away. And when the seed actually germinates, you still don't see the fruit right away. It takes time for the fruit to actually show up. But does the tree actually eat its fruit? Is the fruit made so that the tree can eat it and say, man, that was a good mango, or that was a good papaya, or whatever? Is that the reason that a tree bears fruit? Or is the fruit actually made for the enjoyment of another party? When we look at these things that Paul's saying that we will manifest in our own lives when we're tapped in, look at where he starts. He starts off with agape, and that agape is that unconditional love. And that's really exhaustively defined in his epistle to the church at Corinth. And a lot of people mistake that to mean, just let anybody do whatever they want to do. But actually, agape doesn't rejoice in evil. And when you see that, you actually guide people into truth. You don't celebrate the harm that they're doing to themselves. And that is one aspect of how this actually flows out and influences the world around us. If we're just letting anybody do whatever they want, that's not really going to make any lasting change in the world. But then we go on to, once we start manifesting that, we start to manifest joy. And then with that joy, we manifest that peace, that inner surety that is harmonious with the greater cause, where we see that nothing's lacking, nothing's missing. And that again ties in with agape, where unconditionally we see the higher perspective and we know that all things fit in this greater puzzle. Then he goes on to say endurance, gentleness, goodness, faith. That faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. When you're really convinced inside your inner being that no matter what the circumstances look like, that inner vision is a sure reality. Meekness, which refers to being humble amongst everybody else, knowing your place and actually doing your part, but not doing it with pride. And temperance. The last of all of these is actually that control of the ego and knowing where your boundary begins and where it ends. And that is what happens when we actually tap in and walk tuned to the highest source of the universe. And this is what Jesus means when he says in the Evangelion of John, herein is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit, so shall you be my disciples. That's the evidence that we're actually tapped in, is that we're bearing this fruit and allowing the world to actually consume it. And by them eating of this fruit, which is really of the tree of life, it's going to nourish them in that spiritual way and actually create those changes in their spiritual body. And it's by our fruits that the world will know us. He even says this in the Evangelion of Matthaiou, where he's talking about, wolves in sheep's clothing, those false prophets that are pretending to be tapped in, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. He says, you shall know them by their fruits. Because do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree brings forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree brings forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Then he goes on to say, every tree that brings not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore by their fruits you shall know them. And these words are actually a fulfillment mirroring the words of the prophet Yochanan, or John the Baptist, where he's out declaring that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And he says, and now also the axe is laid unto the root of the trees. Every tree, therefore, which brings not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. And as we're accelerating through this crossing point, we're actually seeing that the evil is being rooted out. It's being exposed like never before. And those of us that are actually in tune are starting to bear our talents, bear our gifts, and really manifest this fruit of the Spirit in our own lives. But it's not for ourselves to enjoy. Our reward is beyond this physical dimension. But when we manifest that fruit in this physical dimension, we actually allow other people to partake of it, to see the example, and to actually perceive that potential that they can too align with this creative power that actually manifested the whole universe, and align with their own destinies and manifest who they've come here to be. And as more and more people join this bandwagon, we will literally see this momentum unable to be extinguished. And the evil forces that have literally raised up a wall against this flood will not be able to stand, and we will breach this dam, and we are crashing on the shores of a new continent, a whole new way of doing things, when the old system just seems like a bad dream. That's the awareness that's really welling up in society and in those that are tapped in. And actually, those that are tapped in are already living that way. And when we think back on the way things are, some of the things that have manifested already in our lives, just, it makes the old system almost, like I said, a bad dream. But this is where all of society really ultimately is headed. And the speed at which we actually reach that critical mass really depends on those of us that are tapped in right now and how much we allow that power to flow through in the meantime. It's almost like that 100th monkey effect, where if you don't know the story, some Japanese scientists were conducting experiments and they had monkeys on an island and they were feeding them with sweet potatoes. But the sweet potatoes, when they put them in the sand to feed them, they got all that grit in them and the monkeys really didn't like it. But some of the younger monkeys figured out that they could wash their sweet potatoes in the water, and they started teaching that technique to each other. Some of the older monkeys really didn't catch on, but the younger monkeys, of course, picked up the solution like that. But something very interesting happened when the number of monkeys washing their sweet potatoes reached a critical mass. And that was that other monkeys on other islands who had no way of learning this from other monkeys started just washing their sweet potatoes because they were tapped into that morphic resonance, which is actually what our DNA is. It's an antenna to tap into a higher frequency that is actually that communal mind of humanity. And they're literally trying to bastardize our DNA at this time because they know that this influx of higher awareness is just flowing right through. And that's why they're scrambling. That's why they're trying to make all this fear mongering to get people to do their bidding right away before it's too late and before we really break through and just see what was been hidden from us all along. So tap in, do your part, and manifest that fruit of the Spirit. Really know. Sometimes it might be discouraging because you're saying, I'm doing this all for other people and what's the reward? But really know that that reward is to influence other people, get them on board. Even if they don't say anything, man, you're planting those seeds in their lives. And this acceleration can only accelerate more and more. And before you know it, we'll just be speeding forward into Earth 2.0. So I love you guys. I'll check you in another reasoning sesh. Joel signing out once again. Agape. Salaam. Namaste. Shalom.